أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد: وإبراهيم الذي وفى. وقال تعالى: وإذ ابتلى إبراهيم ربه بكلمات فأتمهن. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد. We praise and thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in each and every condition. Glorified may He always be above that which they associate with Him. We send peace and salutation on our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Abu Dawud narrates in his Sunan on the authority of Anas radiallahu anhu that a man came to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and said to him, Ya khayr al-bariyah, you are the greatest of all creation. And our Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam replied with words of humbleness, and he said, Dhaka Ibrahim, that man you speak of is Ibrahim, not me. Jim Collins has a book called From Good to Great, and in it he speaks of a question that plagued and baffled his mind for many years. He asked, how is it possible that certain companies were able to jump and to leap from being good to great? Are there certain universal characteristics that if you apply them, you can make the same leap into greatness? So he assembled a team of experts to try and answer this one question. And they identified a set of elite performing companies who are able to sustain good results for 15 years plus. And they compared them with a set of other companies who only stayed at good, they never became great. And after 5 years of dedicated research and sifting through mountains of data and going through thousands of pages of interviews, they came to a conclusion that there are certain determinants of success. And at the core of it all, he writes as the following: to foster a culture of discipline. What is discipline? Exemplified so clearly in the life of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. In Arabic, we loosely translate it as al-inqibat. In English, they say discipline. Although the word discipline have some negative connotations, because when you think of discipline, you think of punishment and you think of restriction. That's not the discipline I speak of today. The discipline I speak of was defined many years ago by Abraham Lincoln, who said, discipline is the ability to choose between what you want most and what you want now. In other words, it's your ability to say no when really deep down inside you want to say yes. Now that we've understood the meaning of discipline, I share with you the words and behavior of another Abraham. This time is one of the greatest of all creation, the man in whose footsteps humanity followed during the season of Hajj, the exemplar worshipper, the Khalil, the friend of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Ummah, the one-man nation. During these days of Dhul Hijjah, people around the globe celebrate the legacy of this giant. Some speak of his tawheed, his monotheism. Some speak of his submission. Some speak of his ethic of worship. I speak of something which is rarely addressed, and that is his ethic of discipline. Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, after all, he was commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to migrate on numerous occasions, and with discipline he did that. He was commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to engaged in manual labor to build the Kaaba in the scorching heat of the Meccan desert, and with discipline he did that. He was commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to leave his suckling son Ismail and the mother of Ismail in a lifeless desert, and with discipline he upheld this command. He was commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to circumcise himself at the old age of 80, and with discipline he upheld this command. He was commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to slaughter his own son. Who can do that? Yet with discipline he upheld this command. Every command that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Nabi Ibrahim, come of the hour, he was the man. And one of the biggest lessons we learn from the life of Nabi Ibrahim, that there comes a time in life when something which is very valuable to you, you have to let it go. This was his level of discipline. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised him. And he said, وَإِبْرَاهِيمَ الَّذِي وَفَّى, and Ibrahim, the man who fulfilled his promise. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also said, وَإِذِ ابْتَلَىٰ إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ بِكَلِمَاتٍ فَأَتَمَّهُنَّ, when your Lord tested Ibrahim with certain commandments and he fulfilled them with discipline. Then we turn to Hajj. And what is Hajj but a yearly celebration of the disciplined family of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. And every single rite of the Hajj is a vivid training ground to produce Muslims like you and I who are disciplined. فَمَنْ فَرَضَ فِيهِنَ الْحَجَّ فَلَا رَفَثَ وَلَا فُسُوقَ وَلَا جِدَالَ فِي الْحَجِّ. No relationship with one spouse, no foul language, no argumentations during Hajj. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, discipline. Despite the clash of cultures, different languages, hot temperament, scorching heat, chaos Mina, chaos Muzdalifah. But what you see there, other than discipline and unity and togetherness, people moving in a set motion, one voice, one uniform, one ibadah, one Lord who is glorified in a national spectacle of discipline that is second to none on the face of this earth. And the intention of the Sharia is for this ethic of discipline to overflow from the boundaries of the Haram and into the life of every Muslim. In other words, there can be no happiness, there can be no success, there can be no flourishing, there can be no accomplishment in this world or in the hereafter for people who live undisciplined lives, Muslims or non-Muslims. And I share with you two examples from the modern time before turning to our own tradition. Who would have thought now, when you come into the city of Hiroshima, on one of the modern, contemporary, state-of-the-art bullet trains, who would have thought that this city was struck by tragedy? Who would have thought that just after 2 minutes after the American B-29 nuclear bomber dropped its bomb on this city, the city simply ceased to exist. Everything was incinerated, flattened to the ground, just 120 seconds or so. But despite this tragedy, despite the loss of thousands of lives, despite Japan having hardly any natural resources, with exception to fish perhaps, despite Japan having problems with volcanoes, 100 active volcanoes in and around the country, more than any other country in the world, despite Japan having 1,500 earthquakes every year, more than any other country in the world, the resurrection of Hiroshima began just few hours after the bomb was set on them. Discipline. The very next day, in some of the parts of the city, lights were back on. Discipline. People who wanted to rebuild their country. Just 4 days later, pumps of water were back in the city. There were 30 people who were incinerated, vaporized by the nuclear bomb in the Bank of Japan. Just few days later, the very same bank opened up without a roof, working under the open sky, and using umbrellas when rain came. This is discipline. So much so that an average Japanese worker after World War II used to work 16 hours a day for a cup of rice in return, and they did this without complaining in order to rebuild their country. We are worthy of this kind of discipline. The second example is a German case study. Germany, who suffered the loss of 2 world wars hardly within a span of 20 years. Just after World War II, 6 million Germans were killed, 5 million in captivity, 2 million German women were raped by the Soviets, and 500,000 children born as the result of this. The Allied bombing had flattened and bombed almost every city in Germany. The male population was severely declining, some were dead and others were in captivity. But despite this tragedy, they did not give up. The women came down to the streets and they had 2 objectives. The first objective was to remove the rubble, and with their own hands, without the use of machinery, they cleared more than 400 million cubits of